282 when I'm on scene. I'll be assuming Caroline Street Command. I got a 2.5-story wood occupied multiple dwelling. I got heavy fire from the second floor, Charlie side. I have an exposure on the Delta side. We have one line stretch not in operation yet. Primary searches are underway. Status of the fire is doubtful. One passing command. I'm on the first line. Service speed advised. We're on scene. 2-story wood frame. I got heavy fire from the Alpha side.
Greetings, fans of the Volley Chief. I apologize. My schedule got thrown off again. We were supposed to have part 2 of the movies episode, but my co-host for that, Lieutenant Matt Cassini, he got tied up on the flight line and was unable to record. So I had to pull an audible and bring back a fan favorite. But before I start, it's been an interesting couple of weeks here, and I just want to start off with a little bit of a I guess you could say a tribute. But a couple weeks ago on March 12th, Yale, New Haven police officer Greg Witek passed away after in the line of duty after finishing a shift. He fell ill, asked if he could be relieved. They sent him home, and he tragically passed away. I had the honor of knowing Greg since about a couple days into this millennium. I got hired. It was that thing, right? Like where we were starting off in our careers in emergency services. Greg kind of wanted to be a cop. I wanted to be a fireman, but in the interim, while we were working on getting jobs, we did what most people do, and that's we got jobs as dispatchers. So I worked at New Haven CMed, which was our regional dispatch center, primarily tasked with handling ambulance to hospital communications, but we also dispatched about a dozen or so towns, different smaller town fire departments, coordinated mutual aid, just typical regional dispatch center stuff. And when I started there, Greg was already a supervisor. We were kind of the two, I hate to say it, but we were kind of the young ones in there at the time. So we were the next generation, the young group. Greg quickly, when I started, he was the midnight shift supervisor, and he was a wealth of knowledge. He was just a tremendous boss to work for. And then after I left, Greg stayed close. He still... He attended a lot of storms of research. He always did his research with us all the time for EMT. I always have to say he was the first person to text me to wish me a happy holiday, no matter what holiday it was, whether it's there was Christmas, New Year's, Easter, 4th of July, Groundhog Day. You'd always get a text from Greg first thing in the morning to wish you a happy holiday. And I guess life's twists of fate, but only a few days before he passed, he actually he texted me, and we texted about 2 days before, just a quick Star Wars text. We were something about Star Wars, but I just wanted to take a minute on the show and recognize him. He was a tremendous officer. He dad to 10-year-old Remy. I'll put a comment section and a link. There's a donation to donate to his family. And, Greg was a good guy. He was a good friend. And sadly, he's, adding to the list of ever-growing line of duty deaths that I've known or worked with. So to CMed Dispatcher 282, Greg, we will miss you. And I thank everyone who reached out to me and my CMed team, who it was nice to get together and see everybody. It just wasn't the occasion that I hoped we'd have a reunion at. So rest in peace, Greg, and just take a moment and think about my friend. That being said, now that I killed the mood for the show, I brought back a fan favorite because I was in a pinch and had no other options.
Just keep stacking those points.
So I have Captain Mike Witek from the Storm Ambulance Corps. I figured, Mike, since spring has sprung, now's the time that you should be prepping for your summer boating season and your summer months. So, like I did, a couple years ago with Mike in the winter, when it started getting cold, we talked about preparations for ice rescue. So I figured let's start talking about preparations for the summer boating season.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, so Mike, give us an intro about the Storm Ambulance Marine Division.
Okay, so obviously, we have a marine division because we have a lot of water in the area. We're at the confluence of the Naugatuck and the Housatonic River. We also respond to Lake Housatonic, which is called Lake Housatonic because it's between two dams. So Lake Housatonic is situated on the Housatonic River. We do get our share of marine calls. We have two skiffs, a 16-footer and a 19-footer. We chose the skiff, A, because they're affordable and they take a beating. And then we also have a inflatable that we keep mobile with a small outboard if we need to go to an inland body of water somewhere or assist with other rescues.
Right, and now it's I would say if you take the ambulance corps as a whole, I would dare to say that after like that our most used technical rescue asset is the boats.
Yeah, if you
Uh,
were to look at our calls, yeah, there's definitely a good amount of marine calls.
and as Mike mentioned, we sit where two rivers meet here in Derby. In town, we have a couple reservoir properties. We have a few ponds. The neighboring towns, the same thing. So getting wet and being in the water is something that we're kind of used to. We actually had our original boat in 1955, and it was actually before the 55 floods, which we talked about uh, several episodes ago, where we talked about the recent floodings. But I always remember one of the funny stories I always remember from my grandfather was the night of the 55 flood. He was alerted to the flooding when the chief of the Naugatuck Fire Department called and asked to borrow our boat because we were one of the few agencies that had a boat. And he goes, he called me up. He said the Naugatuck River's flooding, downtown Naugatuck's underwater. Can you start coming up this way with the boat? And my grandfather goes, I kind of made a slide remark about, well, if the river's flooding in Naugatuck, what do you think it's going to do here in a couple hours? And he said he kind of said, "Oh God, you're right. Good luck." And he said that's what actually alerted him to the river flooding, and he hopped in his car and started heading down what was under construction Route 8, and that's where he realized that the river was soon going to come over its banks in Derby. The boat was actually lost in the
Yeah,
flood. They made numerous rescues in the floodwater. They were attempting a rescue when the boat was lost. Throughout the years, we've had several boats. I would say though, Mike, in uh, agree or disagree, but we never really had purpose like prior to the skiffs, we just had a bass boat.
and prior to that, we just had like you know, like the Sears Game Fisher, your typical 12-foot, three bench seats, outboard motor type boat.
Right. So the skiffs were kind of the first, I guess you'd say, purpose built boats for us, where we didn't buy them, off.
Purchased with a purpose.
Yeah, yeah. So uh, and then I would also throw out there that for a while we did seat and have a dive team.
Yes.
It did, the ambulance corps had it for a while. Everyone knows the whole Derby thing. It went to the fire department for a while, then it came back to the ambulance corps, and we did disband it because of just the amount of work, regulation, and uh, for the minimal amount of call volume that we had. Uh, so we did have a dive team at one point, but we got rid of that. But again, we still get a lot of calls on the river. As Mike mentioned, the Housatonic River has a spot where in Derby there's a dam, and then what is it? How many miles is it to from dam to dam? Do you remember?
I don't remember
At
it
one
off.
time, at one time in my life, I knew that, but
Yeah,
I
we did it enough times.
right, right. If you go up Route 34 along the Housatonic River, you'll get to the Stevenson Dam, which is one of the bigger dams. So those
It's at least 2 miles.
yeah, between the two dams, the river turns into a lake because it's dammed, so it becomes Lake Housatonic. And as Mike mentioned earlier, we had the inflatable that's mobile, but for this season, the larger skiff is usually docked on the lake because that's where our, you know, normal call volume is. So we normally dock one of the two boats. But Mike, the other reason that I asked you to come on too about this is because a lot of towns have boats, and a lot of towns, oh yeah, we have a boat, we'll go out. But we're one of the few that I know of that has requirements to be on the boat. So do you want to take a minute and go over what it takes to be a coxswain?
Sure. So, our SOPs with that are, like I like to say, they're a living document. Just because they're written doesn't mean they can't be changed. And we do visit them regularly and update them to make sure that we're staying on par with the conditions of the area and the needs of the community. Our criteria, you need to be in good physical condition. You should have had a recent physical examination, which typically, most of the firemen have that anyway. Free from any influences of alcohol, drugs, and/or drugs. Fit for duty, basically. You should have passed a swim test. You need to be comfortable in the water. And that's through periods of darkness, reduced visibility, inclement weather, whatever you have there, and be able to successfully deploy a Type 4 PFD, a throwable to somebody who may be overboard or in need. And along with that, we have our minimum crew. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was to say, now go over the swim test just to give people and again, we're not, no one's going for special forces here.
No,
Are right, but just to go over that.
our swim test was designed with two things in mind. One was to be sure that, if you're on the boat or we're operating near the water, that you're comfortable in and with water. We don't want to be the first time you are exposed to that kind of environment to realize that that's not for you. So we do, 100-yard swim test. We do, you tread water for 15 minutes and then you retrieve a weighted object from the bottom of the pool. And we chose that distance. I mean, I know lifeguards go farther, faster, and all that, but we chose that distance because typically in our response areas, that's about the middle of the river, we'll say, or anywhere that we're going to be, responding to. So worst case scenario, if you're dead smack in the middle, you should be able to get to one shore or the other.
Yeah, because the Housatonic's not a wide river.
No, and that's one
I
of the
mean,
reasons why there's a speed limit and there's actually lanes on Lake Housatonic. That's one of the few bodies of water in the state that you're required to go up on the right and down on the right.
yeah, it's a unique body of water because it's so narrow coming through here. Same thing with the Naugatuck. And not only is the Naugatuck narrow, but it's also shallow. I mean, they're at low at low tide, you can walk across it. And I'm laughing as I say that because something we probably should have mentioned. The Housatonic River, or the Naugatuck River, even coming up through Derby, is tidal.
Mm-hmm.
So we have high and low tide here in Derby every day, even though what are we, about 6 to 8 miles as the crow flies from the Sound?
Stevenson Dams, I think, is 19 miles from the mouth of the Housatonic.
Okay. So, obviously you got to take a few miles off of that, but we're relatively close to the Long Island Sound as, downriver. I mean, that's one of the reasons we're here, right? Derby was a ship port. At one time, it was a powerhouse in the shipbuilding industry in Connecticut.
Some of the wooden docks are still there.
Yeah, yep. So, it's something that we have to deal with a lot on the lower river is tides. I remember that one time we had the pleasure boat that was stuck out on the rocks just north of the Atwater Bridge. And I mean, I walked out to it, at low tide, walked out to the middle of the river to a boat that was beached on the rocks. So it is another thing to factor in is the tides and that everyone, obviously, if you're not from the area, you don't realize that. But back to the swim test. We digress, as I do so well. The swim test, again, we're fortunate in Derby. We have the community center has a pool. We have a great relationship with those guys over at the pool. When we have the dive team, we're able to do our training there. So we have access to a pool. So the swim test is usually done like, now April timeframe. I know
we do it twice a year. We do it, prior to the two heavy volume seasons, prior to the boating season and prior to ice rescue, if you will, season.
Yeah. And again, I agree with you. I think it's important because, last year when we went to go do the swim test, I was in the water with my special guest swimmer who was putting everybody else in the pool to shame. And one of the members, who told us they could swim, jumped in and went right to the bottom like a weight.
So my earlier point, can you imagine if the first time we realized that was on a call
Right.
and
And
he was part
that's
of a crew? Yeah.
and that's one of the things that I always was amazed about was like one of the newer members told us that look, I'm not really comfortable in water, but I know how to swim. And we got to the pool and he rolled into the water and basically went right down.
Yeah.
So I mean the swim test to me is super important, and it's something that I think a lot of departments overlook or don't think about. And it's a real simple, almost every town has a pool, right? Every town has a community pool somewhere, school pool. Reach out to them, contact them, say, hey, look, we're with the fire department. We just need to do a swim test to make sure that the members that go on the boat and that the members that go out into the water have the ability to swim. And I mean, I would say 99% of them would be like, yeah, no problem. Just come on in and do it.
Yeah,
So,
I would agree. And if not, go somewhere else.
right,
Even if you
right.
have to pay for the rental of a pool for a night, it's crucial that you figure this out ahead of time.
And again, it's not a Herculean event. The treading water,
No, you
swimming,
could have fun with it. It's a good team
right.
building event also.
And then going down off the bottom and retrieving an item.
Yeah, whether it's a would be rescuer or
Yeah.
an item. So.
And then just go over like kind of the loadout of equipment on our boats because we don't carry a lot.
Okay, so along with your PPE, the operator and the crew members, they have to wear their PFD during all activities. Okay, including but not limited to training, any vessel or patient contact, because of course we have that special designation with the boats as a first responder vehicle. And that's whether it's dispatched or crew initiated. Even if you come upon something, your PPE must be worn and worn properly. It's just like turnout gear. If you don't wear it properly, it's not going to protect you. So you need to wear it. It needs to be in good serviceable condition and fit properly.
I was going to start a fight and say, so you're telling me to wear turnout gear on a boat?
Yeah, not enough time for that one. Yeah. So and then because after April 1st of 2021, the federal law to have an emergency cutoff switch, the coxswain has to, we require a coxswain to use the cutoff switch when on plane, when the boat's underway. Should they get thrown from the operator station, we don't want a runaway vessel. Proper uniform, pants, shirt, footwear. Footwear is important because there's, a lot of places to stub your foot or, catch something and cut your foot open or whatever. That's not the place to be open toed or sandals and all that stuff. Get boat shoes if you have to, but footwear is important. And then obviously for all our calls, we still follow any BSI protocols. And then, we have a rule under no circumstances should the vessel get underway unless all passengers and victims are wearing PFDs. Because the number one rule is to make sure everybody has positive buoyancy, victim or not.
Right. And that's something that it's very important. You see, I can't tell you how many times you see pictures of water operations to fire departments and half the people are in PFDs or half the people are in PFDs that are unzipped and wide open. It's the single most important piece of equipment near the water that you can have, and it's also the most professional. If you see a photo of a water rescue operation and either nobody's got PFDs on or they're half on or they're not, right in your mind,
I shake my head. Yeah, I
right,
shake
right,
my head.
right in your
Yeah.
mind, and the other thing too about PFDs that a lot of people, this is a big fight I had in Bridgeport at one time. You need to carry enough PFDs for your boat's capacity.
Correct. That's why
And
we have the infant and child PFDs on board.
right, and that's something that a lot of departments don't take into account victims. So when they go out and buy PFDs, they put 4 or 5 PFDs on the boat and say, well, we would never put more than 4 or 5 of our people on there. Well, if your boat has a capacity plate for 19 people, then you need to have 19 PFDs on there because
you're 100% right, but I was just going to add to that. Here's the other thing. Okay, you in Bridgeport, you guys had the nice Seaburn safe boats, and most people on the shoreline, courtesy of grant money, that have the luxury of those vessels. You start getting inland with some smaller departments, when the boats get a little bit smaller, and even though your boat, your capacity plate may show a capacity plate of 6, when you go on that call, everybody's all amped up and they want to load that boat with all the rescuers. But then, did you leave room for your victims?
Right,
You
right.
want to go with a minimum crew, with the least amount of folks that you could safely operate and affect that rescue. You need to leave room for people on board because you never know what's going to happen when you're out there.
Right. You're going to be picking people up.
Right.
And the last thing you want to do is, that boat is it. You get out in the middle of the river and another
There's no
boat is
AAA out there for us. I mean,
Right, right.
you have safe tow out in the big ocean, but typically we don't have that. We have mutual aid vessels, but the other thing is you want to overload that boat. Now you're operating unsafely. If it's a rescue due to water conditions or flooding, your vessel's compromised to begin with. Never mind loading it with victims.
Right. And then, Mike, just go over the crew assignments because that's the other thing that a lot of people don't. That we have specific crew assignments and job descriptions for each of them.
So we have a pre-trip and post-trip requirements and all that. We have it's a minimum crew of three. Okay, we have the coxswain or the operator, whatever you want to call, and that person's in charge of the vessel. So if I always tell this when I teach at the police academy. If you're going to come on board a fire department's boat, wait on the dock until the coxswain gives you permission. Say, can I come aboard? And say, yeah, come aboard. But they might be prepping. You need to wait. But so nonetheless, the coxswain's in charge of the vessel. And then we have one EMT or MRT, some medically trained person, which we have to respond with. And then we have a crew member or like a rescue tech, if you will. And that could be somebody who, is familiar with the Stokes or possibly can, get into the Mustang suit and go overboard and help retrieve someone and so on like that. But that's a minimum crew of three.
Right. And, another thing that I always used to preach that I felt like fell upon deaf ears, somebody's getting wet. I could tell you that for the longest time in Bridgeport, we would get in our boat, we would go out, we would practice search patterns in the sound, we would practice firefighting, we would do all this stuff, but we never practiced what if one of us has to get in the water to get somebody.
Well, more importantly, how do you get back in?
Right.
How many people have practiced getting back in their vessel? Are you capable of that?
And I always tell everyone, you have to realize someone's going to get wet. If you go out on a water call and the person's been clinging to a piece of debris or they're treading water, when you get there, they're not going to have the strength to bring themselves into the boat. So a lot of times, either you gotta, obviously you could use some ropes, you could put ropes around the person, you could do different things, but a lot of times one of your people gets in the water, and like Mike said, this is where that familiarity, that swim test, having the Mustang suit. And also, the other thing about getting in the water and about being on the boat going to a rescue is you have to be very cognizant of the temperature and not just the air temperature. What's the water temperature?
Right. What's the magic number?
It's 70, right?
Yeah, right.
Right. Still 70. 70 degrees air or water. If it's below that, you need to be in a suit. And I think, that a lot of times you forget that, or people think, well, it's a hot day, it's 80 degrees. Yeah, but the water temperature is only 60. So it's just something else that's, I think, is very important for people to understand.
And even if you could jump in and jump out and do what you have to do in a matter of 30 seconds, a minute, don't forget you have that ride back, and you're
Right.
exposed now. You could suffer from hypothermia, and even more so because of the wind. And remember, you lose your body heat 25 times faster in water than you do in air. So, and don't forget your victim. Once you get them on board. Yeah.
And like Mike said, we carry some medical equipment. There's medical gear on the boat in Pelican cases, but a lot of times the crews will grab stuff off the ambulances or the rescue truck just because it's a little bit more, like the stuff on the boat, it's checked weekly, but as everyone knows, it's sitting there on a boat. So
takes a beating whether you're on underway or not.
We don't have one thing we don't have much of, and we've really, knock on wood, never needed it, is we don't have much of a firefighting capability. We just have.
We had the Gorman Rupp pump.
Right, we did have that.
And that's good, but that if the boat isn't designed with that in mind, it's difficult to operate.
Right. Basically, we just had a 20-pound shotgun. We had a big dry chem on there.
Yeah.
And again, but what are you putting out? If you're out in the water and there's a boat fire,
Yeah, it's going to burn to the water line.
right. Your priority is to get the people out of the water and just get away from it.
Years ago, we responded to a boat fire in a lower river, and it was down to my Sunnyside. And if I recall correctly, some kid borrowed his father's boat that night to take his girl for a cruise, and they lit the alcohol stove on fire, and the whole vessel caught on fire. They jumped overboard and so on. As we approached the vessel, this thing was ripping, like fully involved, and all you could see looking from the stern into the where the cabin would be was the 5 pound fire extinguisher that was sitting on the deck. It was like a dark shadow in the flames. So they're, at a certain point, they're just used so you can safely get off the boat and
Right.
abandon ship,
So, and again, we talked about life jackets. We talked about, ensuring that you have life jackets for kids. I mean, obviously, we've never had the need for search patterns or anything along those lines. And again, we're confined by the body of water that we deal with, which is the river.
But they're not a bad idea to practice.
Oh, not at all. But
whether you're doing a vector search or a box search, or they're good. Pick one and try it, because vector searches are nice because you always steer to the correction, and if the object is floating, you're going to stay with it.
Right.
Your search will be relevant to where the object is. But they're good to practice because you just never know. What if you get called, mutual aid to a bigger body of water to assist somebody?
Oh no, and I wholeheartly agree with that. Believe me, that was one of the basic things that we did time and time and time again. We'd be going across Long Island Sound. My captain would throw a buoy in the water, man overboard, and we'd start our vector searches.
And just correct for datum and keep going. Yeah.
And but again, for our situation on the river, back and forth, for 25 seconds. For 25 seconds, and you're on the ground.
It's true.
And I mentioned earlier the tides being important. So we, I mean, in Derby, we have a few boat access spots on the river, the lower river where the two rivers meet, where the Houstonic, the Naugatuck River meets, where the fire school is. There's a boat launch, and it's actually kind of, I guess you'd say it's kind of a typical, like a funny government tale, because it used to be, for the longest period of time, the boat launch at the fire school was only for emergency services. And then when they closed down the fire school and turned the old fire school into a park along the riverfront, the mayor at the time opened the boat launch to the public. So it became like the only public boat launch in our area for the Housatonic River. And at that point, it was Housatonic River right out to Long Island Sound. That's the lower river. It's below the dam. I mean, how much did when they made that the public boat ramp, we did, if not 1-2 calls at that boat ramp a week.
Yeah. I remember we had a Commodore jet ski because a guy wouldn't let go of the kayak with the motor on it because it was his buddies. And, I get it, but, you're not going to drown for it. But he was willing to, it seemed to at the time.
Right. And again, at the point where the Commodore Hall Bridge, the Route 8 bridge, crosses the river, the Houstonic River, it starts to get extremely shallow. So if you come out of that boat ramp, and this was a lot of our calls, was we actually had boats that came out of the boat ramp, didn't know the area, it was low tide, and they completely bottomed out and tore the bottom of their boats off.
And that's still navigable waters.
Correct.
If you look on a bridge, there's still a port and starboard, the boat markers.
Right. And the ironic thing is, it actually helped us a lot, because since they were tidal waters, and since we are close enough to the sound, we would be able to receive assistance from the Coast Guard. And there were several times where we had people missing along the river. We had suicidal patients that we were looking for, and we were able to actually call in Coast Guard assets to help.
But the times have changed too, because now local municipalities, as long as you've done your boat training, your boat crewman training, you're a force multiplier for the Coast Guard now.
Correct.
So they're going to call you.
Mike, another thing that's important too for everybody listening is Connecticut requires boating licenses.
Yes.
It's been a very, very long time since I dabbled in boating law, and I mean, I've had my boating license, I think, since 1992 or 1994. But
if you took my class, it would have been somewhere after 92. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's another thing in Connecticut is all of our operators have their boating license because they have to.
Yeah.
I know that there are still states that don't require.
So Florida is actually looking. They just sent out some questions to other states asking who requires it. You'd be surprised,
Right.
which states don't have it.
Yeah. So again, another added layer of a training is that, and again, the boating. I mean, don't get me wrong. The boating, the problem with the boat licenses, you take in Connecticut. There's two really. There's boating and personal watercraft for jet
Which
skis.
are combined now. Yeah.
It's okay. So again, it's been 25 years since I dabbled in marine law, and the problem is you could take that class and never step foot or see a physical vessel.
Correct.
Which a vessel, for those of you wondering, is every description of a watercraft other than a seaplane that is capable of or being used as a means of transportation across a body of water. There you go, Pidge. Be proud of me.
Right.
I remember
Boom. Mic drop.
So, and again, just to give you guys some background, one of my first public safety paying jobs was thanks to Mike. A lot of us from the storms, we would get hired as lake patrol officers, which was a giant loophole in the Connecticut legal system, where we could detain people but not arrest them, and we could issue infractions for boating law, and we worked under the guise of back then it was the Department of Environmental Protection. And it was a good summer gig, especially for us that were trying to get into emergency services that, to put on your resume. So a lot of us, me, my brother, Louie, Dean,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a group of us, Danny, that all did it to get
There's
experience.
no shortage of entertainment on the river.
No. And that's the thing is that, as it heats up, as the summer begins to come to fruition, the upper river, the lake portion gets extremely busy.
Oh, when your
Um,
brother was doing it, one of his first shifts with me, we had a guy get launched out of his boat, full tank of gas, and the boat was circling outside the swim areas.
right.
We had to get that boat to run aground. Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah. Yep. And it was a great job. I mean, we had a lot of fun out there. You were the boat cops. You just, you patrolled this lake. There were two of you usually. We had a skiff, like, like the same as our skiff. So we take it up and down the river. It was definitely a interesting summer job. But so that's how, and I hate to say it, that's where like some of our water rescue stuff comes from, is that we spent a lot of time out in the water, and then it carried over for me.
It's
So
always
not,
been a part of us, though. Like,
yeah,
going back to the story of our boat with the 55 flood, if you look in the books, you'll see the guys from the storms rescuing the projector for the outdoor movie theater that used to be where the McDonald's and BJ's and Derby is now.
correct.
Yeah, and when the flood water was coming up, you could see them loading the projector into the boat and getting it to dry ground. So started a
Um,
long time ago.
yeah, and again, it just one of those things that carried through. I mean, and it gave us a lot of different. We got our boat licenses. We became scuba divers. It really, uh, it was it was a fun side part of the business, if you will, because it's something that not everybody did. Our dive team that we had, uh, we weren't a rock'em sock'em dive team, right? We were fair weather divers. We only dove during the day. We only what?
Those your words are hurtful.
But it's the truth, right? We
No,
only
I think we're pretty good.
we
Yeah.
but we only dove during the day. We didn't really, we kind of would be, even for us, we would have been the second string, right? We kind of sometimes would let,
Yeah.
yeah.
We,
I
we
just it wasn't. I mean, you're acting like we were SEAL Team Six here. We were barely like,
no,
uh,
we're like the underwater demolition team.
yeah,
Yeah. You
and
gotta remember though, like I was diving in the 70s, so we've come a long way. Our equipment got better. We would practice regularly on the river. You remember some of those events?
oh yeah, I
Yeah.
do, and the most important lesson to remember is make sure you take all the equipment with you.
Yes, that's true.
So we went to go again. Mike and the generation before us, they were heavily involved in the dive team, and as Mike said, in the '70s, back when they had wooden boats and sails, and we tried to revamp it in the early 2000s. That's what got me, Adam, LP, that group of us into diving. And one day we decided we were going to go, we would go out diving. We'd just go in the river. And we took my wife, and then it was me, you, Adam, right, and LP out on our boat. And the boat was getting crowded. So, we had a lot of stuff on the boat. Katie was going to be our observer, and we were trying to load the stuff on the boat, and I was, let's leave the Stokes basket back at the dock because we're trying to fit all this dive stuff on there, and we couldn't. And we had a little bit of a, I don't want to say an argument, but I would say a difference of opinion, right?
I hit you with some knowledge
On what we should take. And we ended up taking, we looked like the Griswold family vehicle trucking up the river. And we got, 200 yards up the river, and these kids were flagging us down because a kid swung. There's a rope swing on the lake that claims a couple kids' ankles every year. And one of the kids, got hurt. And we laughed about it because we were really, it was one of the times where we all had to admit that Pigeon was right. And, we've never heard the end of it.
Well, you realize you just said one of the times.
One of the times, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. So
I'm slowly increasing to Thode status.
Yes, you're not there yet. You're not a real guest.
Yeah.
You're almost a real guest. But it's important though, and I think the thing about our water program is we have a clear definition of purpose, right? We know what we'll do, what we won't do, when we'll go out, when we won't go out. We know who needs to go out, and we know our capabilities very well. And I would say, Mike, at this point, I had Chief Edwards from Seymour come on here and talk about their experience in the flash floods in August, but I would be remiss, and I don't know if I even mentioned it in that episode, but you guys were involved in that because, as I mentioned, so Derby is a fishbowl, if you will. It's a Derby. Downtown Derby is a lot like downtown New Orleans, right? It's desolate. It looks like they're testing missiles, but it's also sits very low. It actually sits below the water line. So, again, you'd heard us say, in the 30s there was a massive flood. In the 50s there was a massive flood. There was actually two massive floods in 1955 alone. So the Army Corps of Engineers came in, and again, you think of the two rivers meeting as a V. Well, they diked in the downtown Derby. So downtown Derby and downtown Ansonia are heavily protected by flood control systems and basically giant walls and flood dikes. Beyond the protection zone is the old fire school, which now has been turned into Cotter Park, named after Pa, where they founded the fire school. But Mike, run us through what happened there.
You talking about the rescue that night of the flood?
The night of the flood. Yep.
So we got a dispatch to someone clinging to a fence post in the Naugatuck River. And we got down to the access road to the fire school and couldn't make it down there because obviously the floodwaters were, ripping across the area of the fire school, big eddies where the two rivers are meeting. And pitch black, roaring water you couldn't see or hear, so we called dispatch, and I don't know who the dispatcher was, but we should probably find out because whoever it was did an awesome job helping us locate the victim. And I can't get enough credit to the What Three Words app. So they couldn't locate him. He called. They triangulated his cell phone position, gave us the What Three Words. We located it on our cell phones. As soon as we saw it on the map, we knew right where he was. So, it was a tough decision because, it was the entire Naugatuck and Housatonic River ripping through there after, was it 16 inches of rain or whatever it fell?
Yep.
And so we sent some guys on foot over the railroad tracks to see if they could access the point from the rails, and they couldn't. We made the decision to launch, so handpicked a small crew. Went over, did a quick briefing on what ifs. If this happens, we're doing this, and if that happens, we're doing that. So we launched and we navigated over. We located the guy. We could see him clinging to a fence post. The water was almost ripping his clothes off. And we paused for a moment, made the plan, got into the current, the 90 horse motor was having trouble keeping the boat upstream, into the holding station, pin the boat to the fence. He was having trouble getting the throw bag wrapped around his arm. So we swung in, grabbed every piece that we could of him and flung him into the boat, established positive victim buoyancy, and then got the hell out of there. Got back.
Right. And as you said,
it was a white knuckle. That definitely white knuckle.
Right. 90 horsepower boat, barely keeping up, and that's
full throttle. Yeah.
Right.
To just a hold station.
And that's what as I said a minute ago, our capabilities are very well defined. And I luckily that night you were there. There was the right crew there at the right time. And it's important too. We talk about wearing all your gear. Another rescue we had recently, we actually had a gentleman who was walking across the defunct train trestle between Derby and Shelton, and it was the middle of the night. He was walking across it. He actually fell down and landed perfectly on the
rocks,
up against the bridge abutment.
Who would have thought landing on rocks would be your savior?
Right. The guy fell 20 feet and landed on the rocks. It was good for him. And in the morning, a pedestrian heard him screaming for help. Again, the boat was launched. 2 of the members in cold water suits exited the boat and began trying to retrieve him. Now, this was also, too, in the middle of the winter, so the weather was definitely not on their side temperature-wise. And, one of the members wearing his cold water rescue suit and a helmet actually, slipped on some of the rocks and fell headfirst into the rocks, ended up with a concussion. But again, wearing that helmet and having all his protective equipment on it minimized. I mean, the jury's
There's so
out.
much I can say right now. Yeah.
I mean, the jury's out on whether or not there was brain damage.
Oh no, I think deliberation is concluded.
But it's just amazing, and I'll tell you, I mean, as I said to you before, I would say, because when we were young, we cut up so many cars. I still think I've probably done more extrications than water rescues, but lately water rescues are definitely more than extrication. And the water's an unforgiving environment. There's been a few times where we've been out there, and it
will humble you in a nanosecond.
Yes, and you get that little. Are we okay? And also in our area of the country, for if you will, I mean, what's good visibility for us underwater? 3 feet
underwater?
Yeah.
if you could see your gauges.
Sometimes, right. I mean, sometimes, and I will say this, in the time that from growing up to now and spending a lot of time on the Houstonic River, the visibility has greatly improved to probably 3 or 4 feet. But it's you're diving in
I've used bags of clear water at times just to read my gauges.
Right. So it is a very difficult area to operate in the water. And again, we like I said, we had the dive team, but logistically there's a lot involved in keeping the dive team running. And
it's cool to say you have it, but it's so labor and equipment intensive.
Right. So, what else? Anything else you can think of?
Well, the other thing is, we keep talking about exposure suits, but the importance of having just cold water coveralls, flotation coveralls for your boat crew. That's your operator, say, because that's his buoyancy, that's his thermal protection. And he could still work in it. Gloves, if you needed to take the glove off and tie a knot or for your hands, you can't do that in a Mustang suit, but you could do that in exposure coveralls. So that's a key piece of equipment to have on board. And Mustang suits aren't good for everything. You start getting in a little bit of swift water, that's where the dry suits come into play.
Right.
But I mean, they're good for what we have. They serve probably 90% of our needs, but they're not going to serve 100% of our needs. But where we are and the budgets we operate with, you take what you can get and do the best you can.
And the other thing too, I'd like to point out is that we also don't have a hefty electronics array.
Right, but nothing. We don't have chart plotters. We have small plotters and side scan. uh, and that's okay. That gives us bottom contour. If you don't have a lot of turbidity in the water, you usually can get a decent signal and a good picture on the bottom. But you're right, nothing like you guys would have on the shoreline, to plot your courses and radar for anything else coming at you and so on.
Correct. And again, that's just, we would joke because even in Long Island Sound, if you got lost, if you went in any cardinal direction, you'd hit land, which is, one of the oddities of Long Island Sound is that if you go, due north, due east, due south, or due west, you're going to hit land.
Yeah, as long as you had enough fuel to get you the 14 miles to
right.
Port Jeff,
So our area navigation's a little bit different because we're protected a little bit, right? I think it is. What is it? Isn't it? I believe it's Greenwich, Connecticut's the only town in the country that if you go in a cardinal direction from the town center, you're in the same state, but it's a different state. So you're in New York if you go northeast, west, or south. Fun geography fact. It's fun with fun with flags with Sheldon Cooper. So Pidge, anything else on the boats? I mean,
my recommendation is, don't treat a boat, like when someone's coming up to the ranks and you want to be a driver on the engine or the truck, whatever, it's like, oh, you have to walk on water, pat your head, rub your belly, and do all this stuff. Don't let your crews go out and operate. Let them get used to it, because it's not something, you drive a car. So when you get in the truck, yeah, if I turn the wheel left, it goes left and so on. But boats operate differently. They stare from the rear. They react funny. Some catch wind. Some like to, skip across the water. They don't have a good keel in them. They operate differently when they're loaded versus just your minimum crew, or if your crew happens to be on one side versus the other. Get practice docking, practice your small boat maneuvering. Those are the key things that come into play when you're trying to effect the rescue. When you're, inches or feet away from a victim or a vessel, that's not the time to learn how to operate your boat.
Right. And I will say that's one thing that we've always fostered here is, and people are going to roll their eyes when you say this, but for lack of a better way of putting it, we let people joyride on the boat.
No, it's not. We don't let them joyride. We let them train.
I'm saying right.
But you're right. I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
I'm just semantics.
Right. If you have a crew, you have your 3 people, and
I encourage them to go out.
Correct. And some of the safeguards we put on that are they at least I could say when I was chief, I don't know if it's still the same. They had to. One was they had to notify one of the officers that they were going out in the boat, and 2 is they had to sign on with dispatch and actually have them punch a ticket.
Yeah, and they do par checks. They call check in,
right?
And we say how many souls on board and so on.
Yeah. So but again, we encourage the members to go take a joyride on the boat. Just the rules are make sure one of the officers know and sign on with dispatch that you're on the water, and
you're on duty. You need to. Right. You're professional.
And in that way, you're giving the younger members, the newer operators. They think it's cool. Oh, we can go take the boat for a ride. No one's going to say anything. And again, you look at the fire service and you look at how many times we tell people, no, don't go do that.
Right. One of the things you encourage, when these guys go out, we tell them, do something. What did you do for the good of the organization in that time? Do a man overboard drill, practice docking, do something.
Right. So, all right. Well, this has been a good thrown together episode. Mike, thanks for coming through in a pinch.
No worries.
Yeah. And, if anyone has any questions or if you want to, I know Mike's a little older, so he's not into social media like most of us, or he doesn't have much of an online presence. But if anyone has any questions about the boats, the boat operations, our policies, shoot me an email at thevolleychief@gmail.com. And I'll get your information over to Mike, and that way.
And if they want to do a boating class, a state boating class, we can arrange that too. I'm an instructor for the state. We can get it done.
Yeah, and that's it. If you have anything else, don't forget to like and subscribe to the show. Make sure you smash that like button and smash that subscribe button and feed the social media machine so people get me. I apologize again. We were going to try to do the movie review of the great Mike. What's your favorite firefighting movie?
I have none.
Thanks.
I'm here for you.
You're here for me. Thanks. Again, Lieutenant Cassini, we were supposed to record the other day, but he was doing something. He got stuck out on the flight line at work. So we apologize for that. We'll pick that up next week. As always, have a good day. Be safe. And thanks, Mike.
Good day. See you, bye.
FD1's back in service. Commands terminated.